Welcome to Reason for Hope. My name is Adrian, and I am in studio all alone today. We had quite a bit of storm last night, and there was a lot of damage done. And so some of the pastors here at Calvary Christian Fellowship of Tucson have been scrambling to make repairs. Also, our senior pastor is out of town. So we're going to change up a little bit today. And so we won't be taking any questions. Well, we'll take some questions if you have some pertaining to today's topic. But today is going to be a little bit more like Apologetics Monday. And I will be tackling a subject that I really have enjoyed teaching on over the years. It's been one of the things that first led me to faith in the first place. And we'll get into that in a moment. But for those of you who are new to the program, this is a Reason for Hope. This is a daily Bible answer program where we take questions from our live stream audience pertaining to the historic Christian faith. So if you have questions on how to apply the scriptures to your life or how to interpret a specific passage, typically we'd be taking questions like that. So if you join us, for example, on YouTube, you can catch the live stream there. Go to our YouTube channel. In fact, if you're interested in seeing our archives of this program, we have covered a number of topics over the years. But if you go to our YouTube channel, which is A Reason for Hope, if you go to youtube.com/@A Reason4Hope, you'll find our YouTube channel, or you can just search for A Reason for Hope, and you'll find us. You'll know you'll find us if you see that red icon with the white dove, and you know you have us. We also have a church Facebook page called Calvary Christian Fellowship of Tucson, or CCF. So if you go to facebook.com/CCF Tucson, you'll find us there. So we're live streaming to these platforms simultaneously. You can use the comment sections to ask your questions. And we do this every weekday, Monday through Friday, 4 to 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We're also now live streaming to the X platform, formerly Twitter. And you can follow our senior pastor there, Scott Richards. And his handle on the X platform is Scott R4H. That's Scott double T. R, the number 4H. And if you do have a question for Pastor Scott or our pastors here on the program each day, simply tweet out the question or do a direct message, or you can join the live stream. If you're on an Android device, it tends to be a little buggy. Hopefully we'll get that fixed soon, but sometimes the comment box where you can see everybody's comments during the live stream doesn't always work well, but give it a try, see if it works for you. If you want to avoid social media altogether, you can also go to our website. That's calvarychristianfellowship.com. Again, anything we ever live stream can be found there. Past messages. We are a church that teaches through the Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter. So if you want to do a study of a specific book of the Bible, go to our website, check it out. And you can follow along with our senior pastor, Scott Richards, as he teaches through the Word of God. So I'd encourage you to check that out if you can. If you want to email us directly, our email address is questions@areasonforhope.org. That's questions@areason4hope.org. Well, what are we going to talk about today? Well, we get a lot of questions on struggling with faith, struggling with doubts. And one of the things that has always helped me as a believer, I wasn't raised in a Christian home. My father was sort of agnostic/atheist, depending on his mood. And so I didn't have this like bedrock, I've got to believe in God sort of upbringing. But I did, strangely enough. I just knew that there had to be a God. Maybe it was my Catholic grandma's storytelling when I was really little that maybe influenced my thinking, but whenever I was able to articulate, wow, what is there? What's going on in the universe? That was the home that I was living in with my dad and my stepmom and my 4 step siblings was always that of God does not exist. There is no God. Religion is silly for dumb people. Well, I became a believer about college age. And of course, as believers, we all go through struggles. We all go through moments where we doubt. And sometimes this is brought about when we experience trauma in life, where life for a moment doesn't make sense. We experience something, whether it's a loss or the loss of a person or loss of a relationship, whatever it may be. I have come across in my own personal life many of those traumatic moments. And rehearsing what I'm going to share with you today has always been sort of an anchoring point, just one of many that kind of reground me, reset me, so that I wouldn't dwell in those doubts. It just sort of was almost like a liberating freedom of, oh, okay, I don't have to worry because I know this is true. So, and that's what really gives our lives some real meaning and purpose and peace. And so, what I'm going to call this presentation, which largely is from my mentor, Dr. Don Byerly, president of our ministry, Faith Search International, is the parachurch organization that I serve under as an itinerant evangelist. As those of you who maybe are new and haven't seen me on the program before, but I am an illusionist, so I use the art of illusion as a platform of entertainment to draw audiences around the globe and then share the gospel with those audiences using that platform. And Dr. Byerly is the author of this book, Surprised by Faith, which I'll be pulling some of the content for this presentation from. He's a dear, dear friend. I've been studying under Dr. Byerly since 1999 and have been using his material that he's trained me to use over the years to share the evidence for the Christian faith. So our motto is proclaiming the gospel with evidence to all peoples everywhere. So if you want to learn more about Faith Search, you can go to our website, faithsearch.org. We are also building a learning center where we're providing basically education tools for free for anyone who wants to learn a little bit more about why we believe what we believe. And so you can go to faithsearchlearning.org to register for a class. I've been building this website for the last couple of years with Dr. Byerly, creating his content, his work, and putting it together on the site so it's very easy for a small group to go through or an individual to go through, just to kind of hone in their understanding of why we believe that God exists, why we believe that the Bible is his word, why we believe that Jesus is the divine Son of God who came in the flesh and walked and talked with us for 33 years, healed the sick, the blind, the crippled, and then allowed the people that he created to spit on him, to beat him, and to nail him to a cross. And then miraculously, 3 days pass, he comes back from the dead. So why do we believe those things? Do we have good reasons for believing those? And I'm going to just kind of scratch the surface today on the question of the first premise is, does God exist? And we call this presentation Discovering the Fingerprints of God. And I kind of like that title. I think it's kind of clever. It's not mine, it's Dr. Byerly's. And much of the information that I'll be sharing are things that I've picked up in my various apologetics training classes here and there, but largely from Dr. Byerly's work. In fact, if you want to watch his version of this presentation, you go to our website, faithsearchlearning.org. In the media section, you can watch all his Fingerprints of God material. It's phenomenal. But I'm going to start off by giving you a little illustration, and I'm going to be using my screen to sort of help illustrate. For those of you listening on the radio, feel free to use your imagination. But I want you to imagine for a moment that nothing exists, nothing at all. And I'll kind of sort of illustrate, minus the clock on the screen, nothing. But imagine nothing exists. If you're driving in the car listening to the radio, just kind of imagine there's nothing, just emptiness. And that's what's on the screen. And obviously nothing has meaning because there is nothing. Nothing is what Aristotle referred to as what rocks think about. So that's nothing. But if we wanted to have some kind of purpose in something, I would have to put something in the nothing. And so let's just imagine for a moment that we put a beginning point, a foundation, a starting point, and we're gonna call this dirt. Yes, it's dirt because that's exactly what it looks like. It's dirt. It could represent chemicals and matter in the universe. It could represent the periodic chart of the elements. Either way, we have dirt. Now the question here is, what is the purpose of this dirt? Well, really, there isn't one. We can't really give the dirt any genuine purpose because that's all there is. It's just dirt. So someone might say, well, I know how we can give dirt purpose. The reason we have soil, dirt, is to grow things. So, okay, that makes sense. I want you to imagine there now being a little patch of dirt and some grass on that dirt. And so someone can say, see, now the dirt has purpose. It is there to grow grass. That's why it's there. Now, someone might ask, well, wait a minute. What's the purpose for the grass? Now, if Pastor Scott were here, he would say golf. But the problem is there aren't any golfers here. It's just grass. And someone else might say, well, the purpose of the grass is to feed animals. Well, in order for that grass to have that kind of purpose, we would have to create animals. We'd have to put animals on the grass and provide that grass as food for them. So now you can say, if you were to imagine this, that there is dirt and its purpose is to grow grass. And of course, the purpose, the reason why there's grass is to, well, to provide sustenance and food for the animals. And in this case, we have some cows here. Now, someone might ask, well, what's the purpose for the cows? Unfortunately, the cows really don't have a purpose. They don't serve any greater purpose. And one of the problems with this illustration is that we really don't have anything in our little mock creation that has any kind of intellect or ability to really appreciate the aesthetic value of what we've made. All we have is dirt, grass, and cows. So what we need is an intelligent being that can appreciate the beauty and the meaning of dirt for grass and grass for cows. What we need is human beings. So let's say we put some humans in our little mock creation, and someone might say, see, the dirt has purpose. Its purpose is to grow grass, and the purpose of the grass is to feed the cows. And well, all this is there so that it could be enjoyed and appreciated by the humans. Well, what's the purpose for the humans? That becomes the big question. Now, someone might say, well, to eat the cows, that's not a good idea. Although, as a purpose, that's not a good idea. I mean, it's always a good idea because everyone loves, well, not everyone, but most of us love a good steak. But the whole idea behind using this exercise is to kind of get you to think through what does it that makes life genuinely meaningful and purposeful? And when you think about this as an illustration, as an exercise, you begin to realize that, wow, things are really dependent on other things for their meaning. Why do I have this laptop? Well, it doesn't have any meaning in and of itself. It serves a purpose that I have right now to present this presentation. But what is the genuine meaning of all that I've created, and why is it difficult to identify genuine meaning and purpose in our little mock creation? And let me tell you why. First of all, if you were to think about this illustration, and again, if you're listening and not watching, imagine, dirt, grass, cows, and people as the whole of our creation, and each of these elements in our illustration represent the material world, all plant life, all animal life, and human life, but the whole of it is finite. Everything is temporary. It has a beginning and will have an end. And not only that, but it also is dependent. Everything is dependent upon something else for its meaning and purpose. And so what is the ultimate purpose and meaning of our lives if soil, plants, animals, and people are all that exist? That becomes the challenging question. And of course, if you're a humanist or just an atheist, the logical sort of conclusion you'd have to draw as the results of this world is that life has no genuine ultimate meaning and purpose. We can contrive temporary modes of meaning, but life in and of itself does not have genuine purpose and meaning. So there's no purpose and meaning. There's no reason to have any standards for morality. I don't have a basis for morality. So there's no right and wrong. There's no morality. Why? Why would there be morality other than a social construct or me just stating, well, I don't like a certain kind of behavior by other human beings, so I'm going to deem that wrong. But it's not really wrong. That's just my preference that something, a particular moral behavior be wrong, such as murder or stealing. These things bother me, but I can't say they're objectively wrong. And then ultimately, life itself does not have any genuine value. You can't argue for the sanctity of life because, well, there's no purpose giver, there's no lawgiver, and there's no value giver. There's nothing objective outside of me that can determine whether what something has a value or not. And so that becomes the big problem. And in the end, death wins. That's really the ultimate dilemma, is that death wins. Death is the ultimate and final conqueror if the finite and dependent world is all there is. And this just so happens to be the humanist view of God. So when you say, oh, I believe in God, they say we believe that traditional theism, especially faith in the prayer-hearing God assumed to live and care for persons, to hear and understand their prayers and to be able to do something about them, is an unproved and outmoded faith. In fact, Richard Dawkins, one of the poster childs for modern atheism, faith is a plunge into an abyss of nonsense. All religion is superstition, and faith breeds ignorance, oppression, and strife. So that is the sort of the outworkings of this particular worldview, that if the world is all there is, it's finite and dependent, you're left with any belief in religion is just wishful thinking. And the humanist, the atheist will say, gosh, that is foolish because this is all there is. And if I posit the idea of God, doesn't make it so. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, for the moment, I wanted to argue for God's existence. What kind of God would I need to believe in? What would I be arguing for? Well, first, I'd have to start with two premises, sort of not assumptions, but two premises. That first, God is eternal. If you go to the Greco-Roman versions of all the pantheon of deities, these gods were personal but not eternal. They had beginnings and ends. So you can't have just another, because if God is not infinite, then he is also dependent, and he's like everything else. He depends on something else for his existence. So he has to be eternal, but he also has to be personal. All the monistic religions like Hinduism and Buddhism believe that all reality is one and that it's eternal, but no personhood. A monist, a true monist, won't pray, because who are you praying to? It assumes an I-you relationship. So monism is the belief that all reality is one, and that individual personhood is an illusion, and that we're simply going to reach a point in our reincarnation, and eventually when we reach quote-unquote heaven, which in Buddhism is nirvana, and in Hinduism is moksha, I think it's called, the idea that we'll just become one with the universe. There won't be an I and a you and they. It's just one big I. And pantheism is the view that, well, this great I is God. It's divine. So that's why we call it pantheism. All, pan, theos, God. All is God, but no personhood. So neither one of these work for the human experience, because we're all individuals. We're all with individual personalities. So we know, based on our experience, that individual personhood is part of reality. And also, in order to get over the previous dilemma of not having an infinite regress of dependent creatures depending on other things for their meaning and purpose, we need it to be eternal. So God must be not just personal, not just eternal, but both. He has to both be eternal and personal. And so how do we argue for such a God? Well, back to what the atheists say when they hear of this proposition that God is both infinite and independent. He is not dependent on anything else for his existence, and he is a person. He is personal. Well, Dr. Anthony Flew, another poster child for atheism, proposed a very, very clever little illustration that I'll share with you. And this is going to sort of set the stage for these fingerprints that we're going to identify here in the next, 38 minutes. So that Dr. Anthony Flew was, like I said, the poster child for atheism, and he suggested this little anecdote, this little illustration, to sort of stump the theists, stump those who would put their faith in God. And he worded it like this. He says, imagine two explorers walking through the wilderness, and they come across a garden. And one of the explorers, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not reading the actual one version. It is, I think, illustrated here in this book, but I'm kind of paraphrasing. So in case I get it wrong, don't worry. This is the gist of his illustration. He says that one of the explorers looks at the garden and goes, huh, there's obviously someone who is here, planted this garden and takes care of it. The other explorer is sort of a skeptic, and he goes, we're in the middle of nowhere. There's no way that there is someone here tending and taking care of this garden. Well, the believer says, well, let's wait and see. And so they stay up all night and they look, and they don't see anyone. No one comes to tend the garden. No one comes at all. And so the next day they begin their dialogue, and the skeptic says, see, there's nobody here. And the believer goes, yes, but perhaps this gardener is invisible. That's why we didn't see him, because this gardener is an invisible gardener. So they stay up again, set up electrified fences and bloodhounds and everything you can detect something that's there physically but not visible. And, well, nothing happens. Not a single electric shock, not a single bloodhound raises an eyebrow. The next day says, see, I told you, no gardener. But then the believer says, no, see, there is a gardener. See, we're just missing it. This gardener is not only invisible, but also intangible, eternally elusive. So it's invisible, intangible, and eternally elusive. And of course, the skeptic despairs and says, but what remains of your original assertion? Just how does what you call an invisible, intangible, eternally elusive gardener differ from an imaginary gardener or no gardener at all? In other words, what this person is arguing is that an invisible, intangible, and eternal but elusive God is no different than just what you're imagining. There's no way to really know there is. Now, obviously, the argument fails on many levels, but it is an interesting illustration to get the wheels turning, to get the thinking going. And so I want you to imagine our little creation again, our little mock creation, the soil, the grass, the cows, and the people. And I want you to imagine that this is our universe, and we were to just posit, what if this eternal, this infinite, and independent personal God did exist? Now, just putting it on the screen, of course, doesn't make it so. Writing the words God on the screen or on a piece of paper doesn't make God exist. But let's say we want to posit the existence of God, and would we be able to find any evidence if an infinite and independent personal God exists? So we're going to look for some fingerprints of God's interactions in the universe. And so that's why we call it finding the fingerprints of the existence of God. So the first one is going to be the existence of the universe. So again, I'm going to go over real briefly. I don't want to go into an exhaust because I don't have enough time, but just briefly go over 5 fingerprints, 5 examples of God's existence in our reality that can give us great encouragement and assurance that, yes, I know that God exists. In fact, as I said in the very beginning, during those really troublesome times in life where you start to doubt the most, I rehearse these things in my mind. I sit down in a prayerful, meditative state, and I just go through these. I mean, I'm talking the really down times, and I just remind myself that I have no excuse. God is real. God is there. And so the first fingerprint is the universe itself. Now, why would I say that? Well, something must be eternal. And this is called the contingent argument. Variations of it called the cosmological argument for God's existence. But something must be eternal. You can't have an infinite regress of temporal dependent things exist. It's a illogical contradiction. So something must be eternal. First matter, then minds. That would be one option. That would be what the humanists would say, is that the first matter existed and then minds. So that means that matter is eternal and minds are temporary. That's why human beings have beginnings and ends. We don't have eternal. We're humans. We don't live forever. So the first thing that came about, or the first thing that is matter, and it's eternal. Well, the other option is, well, no, there's the minds that come first and then matter. So first the mind, then matter. Well, is there any evidence one way or the other. Well, there just so happened to be, there happens to be evidence that the universe, all physical reality, space and time, has a beginning. It's one of the more certain conclusions that we have made as we observe the universe, observe, practice science and history, is that the universe is finite. It has a beginning. So the universe can't be our option. Now, the way that works in the argument is this. It's called the principle of causality. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. It's pretty simple. The cosmologic argument is very similar. Why is there something, not nothing? And if there is a beginning, there must be a beginner. A really simple argument, and it still has sort of time tested as a good argument, and it's the one that really got me thinking when I was a teenager, because I was being told in school that the universe had a beginning. There was nothing, and then there was something. And the principle of causality, the law of causality, says, well, whenever that happens, there's always a cause. Whenever you have something that depends on something else, that's why they call it the contingency argument, it's contingent. You can't have a contingent existence without a necessary existence. Something is necessary means I have to have this in order to have anything else. So there has to be something that's eternal before I can have anything else. And if the universe is temporal, it had a beginning, then it must have a cause. So that's the first fingerprint. The second fingerprint, and this is the one that I want to spend the most time on, is the clear evidence of intelligent design in nature. So again, how do we know that a personal creator God exists? By seeing the clear evidence of intelligent design in nature. Now, when my wife and I first got married, we did a 6-month, 6-country missionary tour, 20 cities. We spent quite a bit of time on the road and doing what we do as ministers, as entertainers and evangelism. And we went to Egypt. As you can see, a little screenshot of our first time that she went there. This was like my 4th time, I think, going there. But I thought I'd play a little prank on her, and it wasn't really a prank. I was just kind of joking around. But I said, honey, isn't it amazing when we went to go visit the pyramids? Isn't it amazing that these pyramids arose as a result of thousands, no, millions of years of dust storms? And I put on this really straight face, and you know, she just kind of trusts everything I say sometimes. Not anymore, but when we were first married. And I just had this really straight, strong face, and she goes, nuh-uh. Like, for a moment, I mean, I know she didn't believe me, but for a moment she thought, wait, what? I thought the pyramids were built by people. Well, that's a clear example of what I mean by intelligence. A very simple example. If you were to look at the Egyptian pyramids, no one would ever suggest that those pyramids arrived by chance, by accident. Dust storms, big tornado, an epic globe-destroying tornado that just kind of went through and, you know, Grand Canyon level, and they just happened to stack all those stones just right. No, that's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous, because everyone looking at the pyramids would automatically know that they're there as a result of intelligence. It's been designed. Let me give you another example here. You may not recognize this image, and for those of you listening, I want you just to imagine a mountain, just a rocky mountain. Now, right now, if I were to ask you, does that rocky mountain look designed, like it was designed? And someone will say, well, no, I see rain erosion. I see, you know, you can see some of the rocks here and there breaking off. It just looks like a huge rocky mountain. Well, I'm going to flip the picture, and I'm going to travel literally on the other side of the mountain and show you that side. If I were to show you that side, and all of a sudden you were to see, well, Mount Rushmore. Now, if I were to ask you the question, is that mountain there as a result of chance, randomness? And someone will say, well, no, of course not. Those faces on the side of that mountain are clearly designed. That's not the result of rain erosion and wind erosion, sandstorms. That would be ludicrous. We would just automatically look at that and go, that was designed. If I were to show you a couple rocks that I found in the ground, and you can find a lot of these all over here in the desert in southern Arizona, if I were to show you these, you would say, huh, are those just normal rocks? Well, an expert would say no, and they would have an entire science that's developed to determine whether these rocks are the shapes they are based on just the way they formed or by intelligent design. These are arrowheads. If you're not watching, imagine a couple of arrowheads. Now, if you were to pick up a couple broken rocks with a sharp edge, you might think, oh, well, that has a sharp edge. That might be, well, no, it's not intelligently designed. It's there by chance. But anthropologists can actually pick up a rock, hand it to their geologist buddy, and go, is this been tampered by human beings or not? And they would be able to tell the difference. Why? Because of intelligent design. They could tell the difference. Now, a little bit more of a definition here of what I mean by intelligent design to get just briefly technical, very briefly. Intelligent design examines the distinction between three modes of explanation. Okay, so three modes of explanation of nature, phenomena. One would be necessity, law. Did it have to happen? The other is chance. Did it happen by accident? And the third is design. Did an intelligent agent cause it to happen? Now, let's go through those. So these are the distinctions between modes of explanation, how to explain phenomena in nature and so on. So necessity would be like law. So if I took let's say a dice, just game dice, and if I were to hold it up up in the air and just let go, the dice falling, did that happen by chance? Or did I design the dice to fall? Or did it happen by necessity, by a natural law? Well, obviously, if I hold a dice in the air and I let go, that is a necessity. My explanation for that is that it will always fall, not because I designed the dice to fall, not because it happened to fall this one time and maybe next time it won't fall by chance. No, there's a law in nature that we refer to as gravity. That's why it's called a law, because every time I let go of the dice, it will fall. Now, once it falls and hits the table, what happens after that? Well, that's another phenomena that I would want to explain. Let's say it lands on a 5. Would I say that 5 was designed? Well, I don't know of any way to design it to land on 5. Let's try it again. Oh, this time it's a 2. Well, clearly I didn't design it to land on 5 because this time it's 2. Well, is there a natural law that's telling me to drop the dice and it falls and it always lands on 5s and 2s? No, this would be how you would explain chance. Every time I drop the dice, it's a necessary law causing it to fall, but as it hits, that's when the randomness, the chance that it'll hit a specific number each time. And so it'll be random. Now, if I were to drop that die 20 times and get 6 every single time, then you would say, I heard you were an illusionist. You're doing something, aren't you? You have designed the dice to land on a 6. And so that the explanation for that would be design. Now, what's problematic here is that contemporary science considers necessity and chance as fundamental modes of scientific explanation. But they repudiate design as an explanation. This is highly problematic, especially for those of you who are agnostic or atheists out there. Why is design not a possible scientific explanation for phenomena, for things in nature? Because design inference, making design inferences, already an essential part of very uncontroversial parts of various scientific activities like forensic science, artificial intelligence, cryptography, and SETI. So how can design be detected? There are two essential components. So again, we don't want to rule out design as an argument. People in the scientific community just shun it this way. I think it's because of their bias. I think it's just a bias to go, well, anytime you infer design, you're just trying to bring in the God of the gaps. And that's not what we're doing. But there are two essential components for detecting intelligent design. And I'll just go over those really quick. One is complexity, and the other is specificity. Yeah, so when complex and specified information is exhibited, that is a red flag for intelligent design. So I'm going to put up on the screen a series of letters. Now this is complex because there's a lot of letters, and if you're listening, just imagine imagine you took a Scrabble box of Scrabble letters and you dumped them on the ground. It would just be a lot of mess. Okay, well, that's what I have on the screen here, just a bunch of letters. Now, is it complex? Yeah, there's some complexity there, but there's no specificity. Now, if I were to rearrange those letters in such a way, the complex is now specified. So when you have complexity and specificity, that is the result of intelligence. And we know that scientists believe in being able to detect design because they're already doing it. For example, NASA's Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence SETI program studies electromagnetic signals coming from space to see if they have any intelligent source. Now, you might want to ask, well, how would they know? I'm sitting here listening and measuring these signals in space, and I'm listening to them 24/7, and I'm trying to find out if there's any intelligent life out there. How would I know when I found it? Well, they tell you the existence of coded information on the signal. So in other words, if I find coded information in the signal, code, then I know that it's intelligent. If it's random, then I know it's not intelligent. That's how they would know. And this was illustrated beautifully in the movie Contact with Jodie Foster. And in the movie, there was the series of blips in the magnetic detected signal was putting forth a code that was able to be measured and tracked down, and it provided them blueprints to build a machine. So it was a really interesting movie. I would encourage you to check it out. But the idea is that, yes, from a scientific standpoint, you can detect intelligence. Now, let me ask you this question. Is there anything in nature that has such coded information as a fingerprint for God? Well, just like pyramids and faces on rocks on the side of mountains and arrowheads, there is in fact a wonderful evidence of God's intelligent design in nature, and that is in DNA. DNA has very specific language. DNA is comprised of 4 letters. It's like sort of like the complete alphabet that they find in DNA. And these 4 letters are combined into 3-letter words that form sentences with specific messages. So each rung in the ladder is a series of 3 letters, and each rung is a different series, and each of these thousands of words, these rungs, make sentences that make up the gene. And of course, those thousands of genes make up more than 1 million unique blueprints, one for each plant and animal species that has ever lived. So that is DNA. That's what we've discovered about DNA, is that you have coded information right inside our bodies. In fact, when this was highlighted in a Time magazine article about 24 years ago, I think it was 2000, they exclaimed in the article that the human genome, the DNA in human beings, was like a book. In fact, the article calls it life's twisted plotline. DNA is like a book. The idea of the genome as a book with 3.1 billion letters, yet so small that there are trillions of copies inside each one of us. So in each of you and me, there are trillions of copies of these books in us. And the article goes on to say it's not even a metaphor, it's literally true. So in other words, let me put it into perspective. It takes more letters than 900 Bibles in precise sequence to blueprint a baby. And of course, that baby on the screen is my 6-month, it's my son at 6 months, Cal. Oh gosh, he looked so cute back then. He's still cute now, but he's 4 now. So, but the idea here is that you have very complex and very specified information, very, very specified information, which is, as I've illustrated, clearly the result of intelligence. There is no other way to look at it. You cannot say that you have no matter and then over time accumulate this kind of information by chance, by accident. And so that becomes a huge problem. Bill Gates referred to DNA like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any other software we've ever created. So software like DNA is so highly ordered. You'd never look at a computer program and go, oh, wow, it's so amazing that Call of Duty just appeared out of nowhere after writing all those ones and zeros, trillions of ones and zeros, and now you got Call of Duty, the video game. Wow, isn't that amazing? No one would ever conclude that. Yet you can look at a human being and just say, I'm pretty sure that that all arrived by accident, just to roll the dice, when every other example in all of human experience, when we see that level of specified complexity, it's always as a result of intelligence, always the result of intelligence. A couple other little examples. The human body has 60,000 miles of blood vessels. And this is just illustrating what the Bible says of how we are fearfully and wonderfully made. The human body has 60,000 miles of blood vessels. The heart pumps blood through this labyrinth and back every minute. That's kind of crazy. Every year, the human heart circulates nearly 1.6 million gallons of blood, which carry the oxygen to the brain, cells, healing, everything we need to live. And what's also pretty amazing is that that amount of blood is enough to fill 200 tank cars each with a capacity of 8,000 gallons. That's a lot of blood pumping. The heart beats that's 2,500,000,000 times in an average lifetime without taking one single vacation. So that's how wonderfully made our heart is. Now let's take the brain, for example. The human brain is the most complex and orderly arrangement of matter in the universe that we've ever discovered. The human brain contains at least 50 billion brain cells with over 100 trillion neurological interconnections. If all these were laid end to end, they would circle the equator 4 times. The brain can hold the information content of 25 million books, filling a bookshelf 500 miles long. That arose as a result of the roll of the dice from just a couple non-living chemicals, and then over time, the law of biogenesis says that life can only come from life. So you can't even explain how the first cells form, let alone how new information continues to add without intelligence. And so I know I'm getting into the sort of the more details on this argument, but bear with me here, because like I said, when you have those times of, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? How am I going to figure this out? Is God really there? Just think about these fingerprints. His fingerprints are all over you in the sense that God's handiwork. You are God's handiwork. Now, what of our poster child atheist, Anthony Flew? Well, as a result of this evidence, he actually changed his mind. That's right. Unbelievably, he wrote a book called There Is a God, How the World's Most Notorious Atheist Changed His Mind. In January 2004, Dr. Flew announced that he had indeed become a theist. This is the one who used that Gardner argument to stump believers in God into seeing, see, your belief in God is nothing more than just imagination. It can't possibly be credible. And yet here he converts to being a theist, a believer that there is a creator responsible for the creation. In Flew's words, he simply had to go where the evidence leads. He says, I think that the most impressive arguments for God's existence are those that are supported by recent scientific discoveries. I think the argument to intelligent design is enormously stronger than it was when I first met it. But ask the animals, Job said, and they will teach you. The book of Job. This is God speaking, not Job, but this is in the book of Job. Or the birds of the air, and they will tell you. Or speak to the earth, and it will teach you. Or let the fish of the sea inform you. Which of all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? That is a beautiful passage. Which of all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? It is blasphemy to our Creator to suggest that these amazingly complex human beings, creatures, animals, the universe, came as a result of just accidents, roll of the dice. It is unfortunate that some would conclude that. Moving on here, I want to just kind of quickly mention the other fingerprints. Skip along here. So the third one, and this was a little, maybe not controversial, but a little bit heady. I'll just mention it. It's something that I would typically want to share if I'm talking to an atheist or some college students and I'm trying to give them good reasons for believing in the existence of God. I would mention the fine-tuning argument. The fine-tuning argument is kind of, it just means that the universe seems to be finely tuned for humanity. For example, if we were to say, well, what if God does not exist? If God were not to exist, that means everything is a result of the roll of the dice. In the beginning would be just matter, chemicals, nothing else. And all personal life would be, or I should say, there would be no mind or no life, only non-living matter. And there would be no persons, impersonal matter. So in the beginning, no mind, no life, no person. And from that, I have to sort of guess that, well, somehow, I don't know how, but somehow, by chance, we got from no mind, no life, no person, impersonal matter, we got personhood. As I mentioned in the very beginning, that would be hugely a leap. That would be a huge leap. So, chance cannot lead to an orderly world. You don't get, order from disorder. It's the opposite. And so really the reality of it is that in the beginning we want to posit God, because that makes the most sense of the existence of minds and intelligence and personal beings with will and emotion, things that create. So this God creates matter and life. They don't arise through just matter and chemicals, and they arise as a result of intelligence. And so origin of matter, life, and personal human beings comes as a result of God, and not the other way around, not as a result of random chance. And so we call this, when it comes to the fine-tuning argument, we call it, well, it's referred to as the anthropic principle as well. Is it the age of the universe, or I should say the distance between galaxies and stars, the distance between the Earth and the Sun, the size of the Earth, the size of the Moon, the level of heat and mass of the Sun, all these variables, all these cosmological constants, over 100 or so, I think now they've calculated up to 200 different fine-tunings, have to be finely tuned, so finely tuned so that life, by any stretch of the imagination, is possible. Again, it's kind of heady because you have to think about, well, what do you mean by that? In other words, if the Earth were a little bit smaller, or a little bit further away from the Moon, or if the Moon were a different size, or if the Moon and the Earth were a little closer to the Sun, if our solar system was not right where it is in our galaxy, if our galaxy was a different size than it is, if there were less galaxies in the universe or more galaxies in the universe, life would not be possible. And so they call this the anthropic principle. It is yet to be refuted. The idea that the universe and all its cosmological anthros means humanity, man. The anthropic principle says that all that we find in these cosmological constants are pointing towards a purpose, and that is the purpose for life, specifically the life that we see. So all that we see is there so that you and I have a nice place to live, and that really demonstrates God's care and love. In fact, Scripture says, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. Now, the last two arguments, one's the moral argument, and the idea there is that we all have a sense that morality is objective, that there is a genuine right and wrong, but we don't have a basis for that. And so when we experience tremendous, heinous evil, there's something in us that says, that just is wrong, no matter what. And so that is the fourth fingerprint, is our conscience affirming the existence of objective moral values. And the argument's pretty straightforward. If objective moral values exist, God must exist. Number two, objective moral values do exist. And number three, the conclusion, therefore, God exists. And so that is the moral argument and gist. But and I don't want to belabor this, but if you're having a conversation with someone and you decide to express this and say, well, what are the basis? What basis do you have for right and wrong? Let me ask you this. Is there any time in history where it'd be appropriate, even good, right, to enslave other human beings? Is there ever a time in history, is there ever a situation where it would be morally good to oppress the opposite sex, oppress someone because of their gender? Most people would say, well, no, there's never a place or a time where it is appropriate or even good to enslave or oppress someone on the basis of race or gender. That'd be ridiculous. One that I hear often, it's a little extreme, but is there ever a time and place where it'd be okay and appropriate, even celebratory, to torture babies? Of course, we're repulsed by that. Well, on what basis? Why? You have an intuition that objective moral values exist. And it's called moral realism. If you, get a bachelor's degree in philosophy, you'll do studies on whether you are a moral realist or not. And the consensus is, the majority of philosophers agree that morality is real. But how do you explain it? How do you explain why you have that sense of right and wrong? You better find out, because there has to be a logical basis. And as I presented in the argument, if it's true that objective moral values exist, that intuition, I don't have to give reason. I don't have to explain right now why they're objective, but once we know and detect that yes, objective moral values exist, then God must exist. And finally, I think that argument really holds a lot of strength when we experience, like I said, heinous evil. When we go through something that we just think, wow, that's just so wrong. Your gut, your heart, when you see good storytelling that really illustrates the depravity of humanity, something inside a normal, decent human being. When I say decent, I don't mean not a sinner. We're all sinners and wretched in God's sight, but there is a level of depravity. There are the Mother Teresas and the Hitlers, right? When we see the Hitler, something inside us just groans for justice and saying that is wrong. Well, what objective basis we have? Now, my dad, who's no longer with us, was one of the air calves in Vietnam. And so those are the guys that had the 14-minute lifespans as soon as they hit the ground. And so this little poem, it's supposedly written by a Vietnam soldier, an American soldier in a foxhole named Hardy Showell. I tried to find where it originally came from. I don't know if it really did, but it does illustrate my point here about the moral argument for God's existence. And so this is the poem that I've always found to be really touching, if it was really written by a soldier in a foxhole. And as far as I could tell, it was, but I don't know for sure if it was Vietnam or it could have been another war. But it goes like this. Lord God, I've never spoken to you. Again, this is written from inside of a foxhole. Lord God, I've never spoken to you, but now I want to say, how do you do? You see, God, they told me you didn't exist, and like a fool, I believed all this. Last night from a shell hole I saw your sky. I figured right then they had told me a lie. Had I taken the time to see the things you made, I would have known they weren't calling a spade a spade. I wonder, God, if you'll take my hand. Somehow I feel that you'll understand. Funny how I had to come to this hellish place before I had time to see your face. I guess 0 hour will soon be here, but I'm not afraid since I know you're near. The signal. Well, God, I'll have to go. I like you lots. I want you to know. Look now, this will be a horrible fight. Who knows, I may come to your house tonight. Though I wasn't friendly to you before, I wonder, God, if you'll wait at your door. Look now, I'm crying. I'm shedding tears. I'll have to go now, God. Goodbye. Strange now, since I met you, I'm not afraid to die. Very powerful illustration of when you're faced with death and evil, something inside you just intuitively knows that God is real. And that leads me to my last fingerprint, which if you want to go into the details of this a little bit further, a month or so back, or a couple months back, I did another one of these kind of PowerPoint presentations on the historicity of the Gospels. I'd encourage you, but our final fingerprint of God's existence is God's fingerprints in history, where God ceased the hallmark differentiation between Christianity and all other worldviews. God ceased being intangible, ceased being eternally elusive, ceased being invisible, walked and talked with us for 33 years. And as I said, healed the sick, the blind, the crippled, raised the dead, and then allowed the people that he created to spit on him, to beat him, and to nail him to a cross. Christianity alone claims that we can know that God exists because he came to earth physically as a man, as the man Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago. So those are the 5 fingerprints for God's existence. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. We'll be back on Monday with our Apologetics Monday, so we'll see you then. God bless you and have a wonderful weekend.
You've been listening to A Reason for Hope. Thank you again for joining us as we continue our journey through God's Word, one question of the heart at a time. Until we meet again, we would love to connect with you. You can text or email your questions to questionsforhope@gmail.com. You can also find out more about our ministry at calvarychristianfellowship.com. And be sure to join us next time on A Reason for Hope. A Reason for Hope is an outreach ministry of Calvary Christian Fellowship in Tucson, Arizona.